Hey everybody, Aaron Bishop here again with the Bishop's Blurb. The plagues of Egypt, they served as an introduction of sorts of God to the people and to the world at large. You see, Egypt didn't know this God. Israel, however, they really didn't know him either. Now they knew of him. He was the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but they themselves, they didn't really know him. They didn't know a whole lot about him. And the plagues served as an introduction. When God comes to Egypt, he introduces himself to Israel as the God of your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's a personal thing that's going on there. But when he introduces himself to Egypt, he does so through the plagues. And in doing so, he reveals himself as the God of creation. Now, this is really cool. When I first saw it, it just kind of blew my mind. So, the plagues, in order, they go from low to high. They start at the lowest place. Plague 1, the water turned to blood. Where does water gather? Water gathers in pools, in places below the land. So it starts below the earth in a way. The water turns to blood. The next plague moves up just a hair to frogs. Frogs spend their lives in both water and on land. They're creatures of both. So the next plague is a movement upwards, just a hair. The third plague is gnats, flies, fleas, lice maybe. Really not sure exactly what it is. But when it comes to this plague, there's an interesting turn of phrase in Exodus 8:17. It says that all the dust of the earth became gnats in all the land of Egypt. The earth itself became gnats. Now the fourth plague, again, it's a little hard to understand. Usually it's translated as flies. The Hebrew word for the plague there, flies, doesn't exist at all. In fact, no animal exists. The only thing that exists is swarms. It's a plague of swarms. What does that mean? Now, in Judaism, that means swarms of wild animals. Maybe. I tend to think that it's linked to Leviticus chapter 11 and swarming creatures. Leviticus chapter 11, verses 29 through 31 says, "And these are the unclean to you among the swarming things that swarm on the ground. The mole rat, the mouse, the great lizard of any kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand lizard, the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that swarm." I would guess that in Egypt, scorpions would probably be part of that. Now these animals, again, we're a step up from just gnats. They're slightly larger. And when we get to the fifth plague, now suddenly we're into domestic animals, the big cattle type animals, which get diseased and die. Now after this, the plagues, they get a little more ephemeral and they get more personal, because the sixth plague, it goes from animals to humans. Now it's not just animals that are getting plagues. Humans are getting plagues. Their health is in danger. Plague 7. Plague 7 is hail. Hail unlike anything we've ever experienced, because this hail in Exodus 9:23 is described as both ice and fire. Both of them falling at once, killing man, beast, anything that's outside of cover. Plague 8 might seem like a bit of a reversion back to the insect world because it's a plague of locusts. But if you pay close attention to the text in Exodus 10:13, it's an east wind that brings the locusts. God's control over the wind now is in play. Number 9, it's darkness, the very luminaries in the sky. For a culture that worshiped the sun, having the sun go out, that's a huge deal. Plague 9 demonstrates God's control over that very first aspect of creation. It's not just the luminaries of day 4. The darkness was so heavy it could be felt. It's the light from day 1 was removed from Egypt. And then in 10, the final plague, God demonstrates his control, his finite control over the very essence of life. He decides who lives and who dies among the people. And it's based on arbitrary things like who has blood on the doorposts of their house or who was born first in the family. Now these plagues, they served to reintroduce a world that had forgotten the God of creation back to the God of creation. You want to know who's in charge of the created order? It's not the pagan gods that you all serve. The one who's in charge of the created order is the one who created them in the first place. And that is demonstrated